Lauren's great, isn't she? She's just terrific. Anyway, I wanted to say thank you for the opportunity of speaking here. I think this is, oh, thank you. I think this has been a tremendous conference. I have to be really nice to Tom, otherwise he'll shut me off. He has ultimate power. But this has been a terrific, tremendous conference. And I wanted to thank the dedication of CFI, the organization, the staff. I know what it takes to run an organization, budget considerations, all that fun stuff. And they've done a tremendous job. And special thanks to Melody Hensley, whose idea and inspiration this originally was. So, you know, this weekend I've had the opportunity. I live here in D.C., Arlington. We still call it. If you're in the Beltway, it's just D.C. You know, it's kind of like Canada's just another. Oh, we won't go there. So anyway, I mean, I've had an opportunity to spend time with friends and make a few new friends and colleagues who I greatly respect, and so many people who are dedicated to making this a better world. It's an inspiration for me. It makes those long nights and all the things that we have to go through as you know, running a foundation worth it. At times we can all get a little discouraged, I know, especially trying to meet budget numbers. So again, you know, fill out those forms. It's really important to give CFI a boost. Anyway, so I learned a great deal this weekend, and I heard some new ideas, some old ideas that were reframed that gave me some real food for thought, and I hope this occurred for you as well. And you know, what better way to share our goals, our hopes, our concerns than in an environment where we're free from recriminations and able to speak openly and honestly with one another. I think that is so important. And clearly, we don't all agree on what we should do or how we should go about it. There are people here who I greatly admire, despite the fact that we don't agree on every issue. My respect for them doesn't waver with these disagreements. Rather, my respect for them strengthens. There are times I have come around to their opinions. There are times I just think they're wrong, but you know, no. And there are times that they you know, really give me a challenge and really make me think about my own position and either strengthen it or reconfigure it. That's a great thing about the training in science. There's, you know, if things don't quite fit the hypothesis, then you have to come up with a new hypothesis. And I think underneath it all, though, our disagreements, our differences of opinion, there's something much more common, much more shared than not shared. One reason I'm terrible at debates and I won't do debates is because I would listen to someone's opinion and go, that kind of makes sense. Let me think about that. Let me process that for a while and I'll get back to you. Doesn't work in debates. So I just avoid them like the plague. But something we should keep in mind with situations of disagreement, and I'm going to mention a little bit about human nature, is sometimes the more ideals we share, the more risk there is to animosity when we disagree on details. And think about Catholicism and Protestantism. Their goal is to get to heaven, praise God, love Jesus, recruit others. But the devil's in the details, and the bloodshed based on those details has blackened human history. So remember that. We do, the common themes can sometimes get lost in these discussions of what we disagree on and our thoughts about how we go about things. Let's not exaggerate the differences. We can talk about them, but let's not exaggerate them. And the voices we heard this weekend, they all speak for feminism, despite these differences. And I suggest the contrasting views brings a depth to the movement. Compare this to religious dogmatism, where conflicting views are labeled as heresy. It's very different. Both Susan Jacoby and Jennifer Michael Hecht, who I greatly admire both of them, emphasized the need to know our history as feminists, to understand where we have been in order to comprehend where we still need to go and the adversities that feminists and humanists continue to face. In the first wave of feminism, the focus was on gaining women's rights that now seem to those of us in the West so natural, so normal, so part of our society that we can't today fathom the inequities our grandmothers and great-grandmothers faced. Basic rights, such as the ability to buy and inherit property, or the mere fact that women did not have equal custody of their children. Quite different than today. Susan Jacoby also reminded us yesterday that in this struggle, there were some who looked beyond those basic rights. They looked to the full equality in our very modern way of thinking about equality. And I can't imagine how discouraged they must have felt, these people who had these visions of what they saw as a lack of vision from their sisters. Susan also reminded us that even old white Republican males can indeed speak for feminism. And I wonder, though, if Robert Ingersoll would have been welcome to speak here, if he could. Would he be welcome at this conference? Yes. Or would he be told that because he's not a woman, he had no right to be here? Sounds like we may have a debate here going, and I'm stepping out. Now, the second wave of feminism, which is the crest I luckily was able to ride, and they demanded full equality. The incubation of this wave came in part from the freedoms that women experienced in World War II. When they worked, they were not under the thumb of their fathers, their husbands. They earned an income. They took on full responsibility for their lives, their house, everything that they did was their own decision. But when the war ended, those freedoms disappeared, and everyone expected women would just go back to their God-given mission. Well, we surprised them. We made great gains, and we thought that once such rights were ours, they could not be taken away. Well, boy, have we been surprised. During this conference, while there has been differences of opinion, there have been some consistent unified ideas about what we as a secular movement need to do. The panel on women leaving religion was extremely moving. I had tears in my eyes. I don't know about the rest of you. Jamila Bey, Vicki Garrison, Teresa McBain, and Miriam Namazi talked about the challenges, many of them heartbreaking, that they face when bravely coming out as a non-believer. They are real heroes. They have faced difficulties across the ranges of intensities, though. Losing family, friends, and community are not easy, and many of us cannot even imagine what it is like, although that does not mean we cannot be sympathetic and supportive. Miriam's adversity for us in the West simply boggles the mind. I think it is much harder for us to understand, comprehend how it must feel to risk our lives, in addition to losing our family, friends, and community. Later, when she spoke to us, the sense I had from her is not that she wanted our sympathy. She wants our activism. She wants us to stand up and support our sisters and brothers who face, as she said, the intolerable, both financially and actively. For to be silent, to avoid speaking out because we fear to be labeled as racist or Islamophobic, aids and abets this insanity. We need to be as brave as the women and men who are now imprisoned, in hiding, or seething with uncontrollable rage at the oppression of thought and mind and body. Being polite is not acceptable any longer, And as she stated, if we, the secular or the more liberal or centrist, do not speak up to fight the intolerable, then we leave that fight to the radical right that relies on racism and bigotry to push their myopic and dangerous agenda. We must speak out. We are not risking that much. We're risking being called a bigot. I've been called worse. I'm sure some of you have too. After all, we're called atheists. Can it get much worse than that? Anyway, these women are, I mean, she's such a hero to me. I mean, I want to publicly state, I'm being recorded, I want to publicly state that I will stop being polite and speak out. And I hope there are others in the room who will do the same. Going back to the struggles of women here in the West, the common thread I heard was that we need community, that we need to recognize that women often have different priorities in terms of their concerns. We women, are for so many reasons the ones who keep the family together, and not just children, but our extended families and the families of, our in-laws. We're the ones that are responsible for pulling it all together. And this responsibility has a tremendous impact because, as Jamila pointed out, it was a far different story when it was just her and her husband who were risking the loss of family and community. But when she brought in her incredibly awesome son, who I believe may be here. Anyway, oh, he's outside, okay. Awesome son. Her priority shifted. She wanted that community for him, and he deserves it. Our children deserve our community. It's important. It's important to understand our history. It doesn't mean we have to submit to it. It just means to understand it. What impresses me most with these women and the many others who have gone through such adversities is how they refused to become victims and instead faced their struggles, the hurts, the losses, the risks, and they did this with great dignity and bravery, and I applaud you. There is a cultural shift that has occurred over the past decade or so. It snuck in through pop psychology, self-help books, 12-step programs, and talk show hosts such as Oprah, as well as reality TV, whatever that actually is, and it's certainly not real. And that's the elevation of victimhood. Not that victims don't exist, but the elevation of it. It is not surprising that this cultural phenomenon is steeped in Christianity. I would conjecture that prayer is the ultimate road to victimhood, paved with promises of a better life. It allows us to sit back and accept our lot in life and pray to a higher power who will then decide our fates, based, no doubt, on the sincerity of our prayers. It's pure bollocks. I don't know about you, but I want to scream, get off your knees and do something about it. I want to reemphasize, please do not misunderstand that I do not recognize that there are situations that are horrible and the word victim is appropriate. But let's not fall into the cultural relativism trap and consider that all adversity is the same. It isn't. What is faced by women and men under Islamicists is far greater than the discomfort of some inappropriate sexist remark. Recognizing these differences does not mean, let me repeat, does not mean that we give up on educating the public on what can make women uncomfortable. Fighting for pay equality, fighting for the full representation in government, encouraging more women to go into the sciences. All of these things are worth fighting for. But we need to recognize the differences and the adversities that we all face. By recognizing these differences, I think it provides us more strength, The examples of bravery that have been mentioned about the men and women in Islamic regimes can help those who face difficulties that do not include a fatwa or honor killings. It allows us to rise up and fight for our rights. It gives us that strength to say, if they can do it, what's stopping me? We should gain strength from these women. And this is where knowing our history is so important. Knowing that the struggles for egalitarianism has been long. But this is not in terms of feminism, but just in terms of feminism, but also in terms of humanity. We've made great strides in ridding ourselves from the yoke of religious oppression. But that does not mean our job is done. We need to keep fighting until we have subdued religion to the form of Quakers and Unitarians. I love the UUs. In Greta's panel, she asked the question of what would equality look like? Well, how do we know when we achieve it? I think here we all agree that we still have a way to go, but do we have a long way to go? Well, it depends upon the context. And this has to be, again, viewed in the long history of feminism. And when we view it in the long history of feminism, the distance we still have to go doesn't seem all that big. But when we look at it from this point, from our perspective, especially for young women and men whose impatience pushes society to respond, which can be somewhat annoying, but it's good that they are. I used to be young once, and I was hopefully annoying. And of course, we're always right when we're young, right? I love that. The distance does seem great that we need to achieve. But both perspectives are important. The first perspective gives us a sense of optimism. Things do change, but not without a lot of hard work. But combined with the second, the current view, I hope it provides a sense of empowerment to not be complacent and to keep pushing for what we want. In the last panel, learning from other social movements resonated with me. The Out campaign, well, it wasn't exactly plagiarism, but it certainly borrowed very, very strongly from the LGBT movement. In fact, that's the first time I met Greta. She was giving a talk at Stanford, and she had made the comparisons between the Out campaign and the LGBT movement, and I'm sitting in the back, and I raised my hand. I said, well, the reason why it looks like it is because that's what it was kind of based on, so very good, Greta. But as was mentioned by each of the panelists, it's very good to recognize the strengths and weaknesses of other movements before us. And the one thing that stuck out was the lack of diversity. And that seems to have plagued and harmed every movement in the long run. And they have had to regroup and start including those who were excluded in the past. In the history of the civil rights movement, that shows what we see in the history of the civil rights movement is that activists who were atheists and as well as socialists were told to sit down and shut up, because the overall strategy was to bring blacks into the mainstream, to be real Americans. Now, at the time, it might have been the right thing to do. Sometimes strategies are complex, and you have to give a few things up to make the gains that you really need to make. Unfortunately, though, the atheists and socialists of the civil rights movement have been written out and of the history, and so everyone forgets. And the civil rights movement is seen largely as a Christian-inspired movement. Additionally, women were written out. Most people recognize only one woman's name, Rosa Parks, and all the other leaders were men. But women were actually very central to the civil rights movement. But their contributions have long been forgotten. Know your history. The LGBT movement was, as Greta reflected, largely male-oriented, and they still suffer the animosity because of that. Did it impede success? I think so. And the feminist movement, too, has faced its troubles in the beginning. It was largely well-educated, well-financed white women who did, to their credit, bring in the working class. And in the second wave, it was mainly white middle-class women, well-educated, college-educated, and we neglected minority women, lesbians, and the very poor. it too hurt the movement because it's really difficult for a woman of color and those of poverty to identify with Gloria Steinem, no matter how good looking she is. And so we lost women. The secular movement and atheism is growing. And as the panel made clear, we must expand diversity. How we go about it, lots of ideas have been tossed around, and I really hope that we don't go back and just go back to our jobs and do our thing and forget about those ideas. They need to be, they're seeds. They need to be nurtured. They don't happen on their own. And along the lines of diversity, that the other one is community support. That was a thread that came again and again and again. Involvement with community projects, helping others, and doing so alongside with people who may not share our convictions about the supernatural, but they care about our world in many of the same ways we do. They care about those who have less, and they believe in the importance of community service. And perhaps I missed it. I was kind of in and out a few times, but one of the things that seems natural for us to do as feminists is to start helping battered women. There are lots of organizations and groups in every city that help battered women escape. And I think that would be a great thing for us to volunteer for, and it's something that a lot of churches do. There are also many organizations that mentor women, and you can donate clothes, for work-type clothes to these women, and helping women to get into the mainstream workforce, helping them develop a resume, helping them learn techniques on how to be interviewed, helping them understand, the kinds of things that you'd be facing in an office rather than, working as a, blue-collar worker or someone who has actually never had that kind of experience. And that's, again, something that will really help social change. It really will bring about a difference in our communities. So think about that. Think about getting your groups. And it's not just women who can mentor other women. Men can mentor women as well. Some of my best mentors have been men. And I appreciate them. And they were, they supported me in ways that, now seem kind of bizarre. Being one of the first women to have an office at Advanced Micro Devices was because my boss, a man, saw the inequities of women not having offices. We also need to encourage all of us who are part of this movement ways of creating community, and I don't mean online communities. I mean face-to-face interactions. We can hold somebody's hand, you can hug them, you can hand them a cup of coffee, give them a tissue, laugh with them, tell jokes, and read their facial expressions. Really good thing to read facial expressions. Humans are particularly good at it. Sorry. Okay, my bad. But you can read voices, and you can't do that online. I guess you can if you Skype. Never mind. I want to just my bad, and I'll remember that. I've been chastened. I mean, the kind of support, Teresa's not here now, she had to go catch a plane, that Teresa McBain received from the secular community should be the rule and not the exception. But we shouldn't also wait for people to come out in a big way. There are people that come out in small ways all the time. I mean, Teresa's coming out, as she said, was rather impulsive and rather, big. And but there are lots of people who are escaping religion on a much quieter level. And women like, Teresa and Vicky and Jamila, they can be the role models for these women. Now, we started out with a quote from Timothy. And so I'd like to end this part of the conference with a quote from a white male Republican. Surely there is grandeur in knowing that in the realm of thought, at least, you are without a chain, that you have the right to explore all heights and depths, that there are no walls, no fences, no prohibited places, nor sacred corners in all the vast expanse of thought. Thank you.